Man, I thought I had it all figured out when I met her. A year ago, I was 31, steady job, my own place, and then she came crashing into my life like a tornado, 20 years old, full of fire, always laughing, always moving. We got married fast, too fast maybe, but it felt right. She pushed me to get out of my shell, and I'd give her everything: money, a ruse, stability. I thought that was enough. But here's the kicker: it wasn't. Things started off hot. She'd drag me to late night diners, blast music in the car, and I'd just sit there, grinning like an idiot, thinking, this is my wife. I loved her energy. But after a few months, that spark started fading. I'm a guy who likes his quiet, come home, kick back, maybe watch a game. She wasn't built for that. She'd pace around like a caged animal, itching to bolt out the door. Let's go somewhere, she'd say, every night. Bars, friends, shopping. She'd spend hours out there, coming back at dawn smelling like cheap wine, while I'm sitting there wondering why the house looks like a tornado hit it. I wasn't asking for much. Just help out a little, you know? Keep the place straight. Maybe cook something that wasn't burnt toast. She couldn't. Cheese on bread was her limit, and half the time she'd forget that too. So we ordered takeout, hired caterers, whatever it took. I didn't care about the money, I cared about us. But she didn't see it that way. To her, I was the boring guy chaining her down. She'd roll her eyes when I'd ask her to stay in, like I was the bad guy for wanting a home, not a party pad. Then the excuses started. I'm going out with Jess, she'd say, tossing her hair, grabbing her purse. Jess was her best friend, wild like her, always up for a good time. I didn't think much of it at first. She'd stumble in late, giggling, saying they've been dancing or whatever. Fine, I trusted her. But something started gnawing at me. She'd get these texts, smirk at her phone, then lock it quick when I walked by. Her stories got sloppy too, like she'd say they went to one bar, then mention a totally different place 5 minutes later. I'm not dumb. I started paying attention. One night, I flat out asked her, "Hey, you and Jess have been out a lot. What's the deal?" She laughed it off, leaned in close, and said, "Come on, babe, we're just friends having fun. Don't be paranoid." That word, paranoid, stuck in my craw. I wasn't paranoid. I was awake. But she had this way of making me feel like I was overreacting, like I was the one breaking us. So I let it slide. Big mistake. A week later, I'm sitting there, staring at the clock, 2 a.m., no sign of her. She'd said she was with Jess again, but something felt off. Call it a gut punch. I grabbed my phone and texted Jess myself. "Hey, you guys still out?" The reply came fast. What? I haven't seen her in weeks. My stomach dropped. Weeks? I read it again, thinking I'd misunderstood. Nope. Just kept typing. She's been with some guy lately. I figured you knew. Some guy. Those words hit me like a freight train. My wife wasn't just out with her friend. She was with someone else. And she'd been lying to my face about it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat there, hands shaking, trying to piece it together. Who was he? How long? My head was spinning, but one thing was clear. I wasn't gonna sit around wondering. I needed the truth, and I wasn't waiting for her to hand it to me. Just was in on this now, whether she liked it or not. So there I was, staring at Jess's text, my whole world tilting sideways. Some guy. That's all it took to light a fire under me. I wasn't just hurt, I was mad. The kind of mad that burns slow and deep, like a coal stove you can't put out. My wife, the woman I'd given everything to, was sneaking around, and I'd been too blind or too stubborn to see it. But now my eyes were wide open, and I wasn't about to let this slide. It didn't start like this though. Back when we first got hitched, she'd look at me like I hung the moon. I'd come home from work, she'd be bouncing around, telling me about her day, dragging me into her chaos. I liked it. Her spark kept me going. But that didn't last. A few months in, she started pulling away. I'd ask her to stick around, help me make the place ours, and she'd huff like I'd asked her to scrub floors with a toothbrush. I'm not your maid. she'd snap. Fair enough, unsake. But I wasn't asking for a servant, I was asking for a partner. Then the complaints rolled in, sharp and constant, like a dripping faucet you can't fix. You're always telling me what to do, she'd say, arms crossed, glaring at me. You like a father, not a husband. That one stung. A father? I wasn't trying to control her. I just wanted us to build something solid. She'd go on about how I didn't let her breathe, how I hated her going to parties, how I was smothering her. You don't get me, she'd throw out, like I was some old man ruining her fun. I'd bite my tongue, thinking maybe she was right, maybe I was too stiff. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about that. She just didn't want what I wanted. She'd storm out anyway, purse slung over her shoulder, yelling, I'm going to Jess's. I'd sit there, stewing, wondering why every night had to be a battle. She wanted to party till dawn, stumble home reeking of booze, sleep all day while I'm up working to keep us afloat. I'd ask her to pitch in, maybe tidy up, cook something simple, and she'd laugh it off. You married me, not a chef, she'd say, smirking. Yeah, I married her, but I didn't sign up for a ghost who only showed up to crash. That night after Jess's text, I couldn't sit still. My chest was tight, my head pounding. I called Jess right then, no hesitation. What do you mean? Weeks? I asked, voice steady but barely. She sounded nervous. Muck, I thought you knew. She's been talking about this guy, Mork. I think. Met him through some friend at a bar. I figured she told you. Mart. The name hit me like a sledgehammer. I didn't know him, but I hated him already. Just kept talking, spelling it all. Looks like she's been using me as a cover. Says she's with me, but she's not. I didn't want to get in the middle, but, man, I'm sorry. Sorry didn't cut it. My wife was lying and just was caught up in it, whether she meant to be or not. I didn't waste time. We're finding out, I said. Sen. You and me. I need to see it for myself. Just paused, then sighed. Okay, let's do it. I grabbed my keys, my phone, my guts twisting into knots. I wasn't playing games anymore. She wanted to treat me like some clueless old man? Fine, but I wasn't waiting around to catch feelings or second-guess myself. I was done being the fool. Jess and I hashed it out quick. Next time my wife said she was out with Jess, we'd be ready. I didn't know what I'd find, but I knew one thing. I wasn't letting her slip away with my pride still intact. Whatever was coming, I'd face it head on. The next few days were a blur, like walking through fog with a storm brewing just out of sight. I didn't say much to her, couldn't, really. Every time she opened her mouth, I'd hear Jess's voice in my head. Some guy. Mart. It ate at me, not at my bones. She'd flit around the house, same as always, tossing out her usual lines. Heading to Jess's tonight, she said that Thursday, barely looking at me as she grabbed her jacket. I nodded, kept my face blank. As son, I muttered, but inside I was boiling. She didn't even blink, just walked out, heels clicking, leaving me alone with the mess she never cleaned up. I texted Jess the second the door shut. She's on her way. You ready? Just shot back. Yeah. Meet me at the bar on 5th. She's been talking about it nonstop. The bar on 5th, some loud, crowded joint I'd never step foot in. Perfect spot for her to disappear into, I guess. I didn't waste time. Grabbed my coat, my zone, and headed out. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my gut was churning. This wasn't about playing detective. I wasn't gonna sit around piecing clues together. I just needed to see it, catch her red-handed, and in the charade. Just was waiting outside when I pulled up, her arms crossed, looking jittery. She's in there, she said, nodding toward the neon lights. I saw her go in 20 minutes ago. Didn't say hi, figured it'd tip her off. I gave her a horn look. You sure about this guy? Just nodded, quick. Mart. Tall, loud. Thinks he's hot stuff. She's been all over him lately. That was enough. I didn't need a biography. My jaw tightened, and I started walking. Just followed, half a step behind. Inside, the place was a mess of noise, music thumping, people shouting, glasses clinking. I scanned the room, my eyes cutting through the crowd. Then I saw her. She was at the bar, leaning close to some guy tall, like Jess said, with a cocky grin plastered on his face. My wife was laughing, her hand on his arm, her head tilted just so. It hit me like a punch to the chest. That was, that look, I hadn't seen it aimed at me in months. Maybe ever. I didn't think. Just pulled out my phone and started recording. Kept it low, casual, like I was checking a text. She didn't notice, too wrapped up in him. Just whispered, "That's him." But I didn't need her to tell me. I could feel it, the betrayal radiating off them like heat. They didn't kiss, didn't do anything blatant, but the way she hung on him, the way he leaned in, anyone with eyes could see it. I got maybe 30 seconds of footage before I stopped. It wasn't about evidence for some courtroom, it was for me. Proof I wasn't crazy. I turned to Jess, my voice low and rough. "We're done here." She nodded, pale, like she knew the storm was breaking. We stepped outside, the cold air hitting me hard. I played the video back, watched it again, and every second made my blood run hotter. "What now?" Jess asked, shifting on her feet. I didn't hesitate. "I'm confronting her. Tonight. She's not wiggling out of this." We waited. An hour later, she came stumbling out, arm looped through his. They were laughing, oblivious, heading toward his car. I stepped forward, phone still in hand, and called her name sharp, loud enough to cut through the noise. She froze, her eyes locking on mine, wide with shock. Mark, or whatever his name was, stopped too, sizing me up. "Hey, babe," I said, my tone ice cold. "Thought you were with Jess." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Jess stepped up beside me, arms crossed, staring her down. The trap was sprung, and she knew it. The street went dead quiet, or maybe it was just in my head. Her face went white, like she'd seen a ghost, and that Mark guy just stood there, shifting his weight, looking between us like he wasn't sure if he should bolt or play tough. I didn't care about him. My eyes were locked on her, my wife, the woman who'd sworn to stand by me. And there she was, caught, no excuses left to throw my way. "What's this?" I said, holding up my phone, the video still paused on her laughing with him. My voice was steady, but inside I was a furnace, anger, hurt, all of it roaring through me. She stammered, it's not what you think," but it was weak, crumbling before she even finished. Just stepped closer, her voice cutting in. "Don't lie. I haven't seen you in weeks. You've been using me as a cover." That hit her like a slap. Her best friend, turning on her right there in the open. I saw the panic flash in her eyes, and part of me wanted to roar, to let every ounce of rage loose, but I held it in. "Not here. Not like that." Mark finally piped up, hands up like he was some innocent bystander. "Hey, man. I didn't know she was." I cut him off with a look, sharp enough to shut him up. "Don't," I said, low and hard. He backed off, muttering something, but I wasn't listening. This wasn't about him. This was about her, about us, about the life I thought we had. She took a step toward me, reaching out. "Please, let's just talk." I shook my head, stepping back. "Talk? You've been talking plenty. Just not to me." I played the video again, right there in front of her, volume up so she couldn't dodge it. Her voice, her laugh, echoing off the pavement. She flinched, like it was a knife twisting in her gut. "I trusted you," I said, and my voice cracked just once, but enough to let the hurt bleed through. "I gave you everything, and you're out here acting like I'm nothing." She started crying then, big messy tears, but it didn't move me. "Not anymore. You said I was like a father, controlling you. Maybe I was just trying to keep us together. Guess that wasn't enough." Just stayed quiet, but I could feel her tense beside me. My wife, ex-wife, in my head already tried again. "I didn't mean for this. I just needed." She trailed off, like she didn't even know what she needed. Freedom? Him? Anything but me? I didn't wait for her to figure it out. "You're done," I said, final, like slamming a door. "Go back to his place, your parents, wherever. Just not my house." Her eyes widened, like she hadn't seen it coming. Maybe she thought I'd beg, or yell, or drag this out. But I was past that. I turned to Jess. "Let's go." We walked away, her sobs fading behind me. The drive home was silent. Just didn't say much, just stared out the window, probably feeling the weight of it too. I didn't care. My mind was racing, but clear, crystal clear. She'd made her choice, and I wasn't gonna be the guy chasing after someone who didn't want me. When I got home, I didn't sit around moping. I started packing her stuff, clothes, shoes, whatever she left scattered around. Not out of spite, but because I needed her gone, every trace of her out of my space. The house felt empty, but it was mine again. By morning, she showed up, banging on the door, voice shaky. "Let me in. We need to talk." I opened it, bags already by the steps. "Nothing to talk about," I said, calm but cold. "You picked him. Live with it." She stood there, stunned, like she couldn't believe I'd cut the cord so fast. But I wasn't bluffing. She grabbed her stuff, tears streaming, and left. I shut the door and locked it. That was it. Over. Done. No looking back. The house was quiet after she left, like, unnaturally quiet. No clatter of her heels, no half-hearted apologies, just the hum of the fridge and my own breathing. I stood there, staring at the door I'd just locked, her bags gone from the steps. It didn't feel like a win. It felt like a good punch that kept on giving, but at least it was over. I wasn't gonna be the guy who let her walk all over me and called it love. That much I knew. I didn't sleep that night. Sat on the couch with a beer, replaying it all, not to wallow, but to make sense of it. A year ago, she'd been this whirlwind, pulling me into her orbit, and I'd thought I'd found something real. Now, she was just a stranger who'd worn my ring for a while. The video was still on my phone. I didn't watch it again, but I didn't delete it either. Prince, maybe, that I hadn't imagined it, that I wasn't the paranoid fool she tried to paint me as. Just called around midnight, voice soft. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I lied. "Thanks for having my back." She didn't push, just said goodnight. Good enough. The next day, word started spreading. Turns out, just wasn't the only one fed up with her lies. A couple of her other friends, one she'd dragged into her nightlife, reached out, piecing things together. They'd seen her with Mark too, but she'd sworn them to silence, said I was overbearing, that she needed an escape. Escape from what? A roof over her head? A guy who'd bend over backwards for her? I didn't get it, but I didn't need to. She trashed what we had, and that was on her. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. Her parents called me that afternoon. Her old man's voice was gruff, tired. "She showed up here this morning, crying, bags in hand. Said you kicked her out." I didn't flinch. "Yeah, caught her with some guy. She's been lying for weeks." There was a long pause, then her mom got on, voice shaking. "We didn't raise her like this. We're so sorry." Sorry didn't fix it, but it hit me. They knew. She'd run back to them thinking they'd take her side, but they'd already heard whispers from mutual friends. Her little world was caving in, and she didn't even realize how bad it had gotten. For Dan kept talking. "She's staying here, but we're not bailing her out. She needs to figure this mess out herself." I almost laughed, almost. The girl who couldn't cook toast or keep a house straight was back under their roof. No husband, no best friend, no cash to burn. She lost it all in one night, and I didn't feel a shred of pity. She'd picked that guy, picked her freedom, and now she had it. Allah. Days turned into weeks. I threw myself into work, started fixing up the house, stuff I'd put off because she'd hated the noise. It was mine again, not some halfway home for her chaos. People asked about her, and I kept it short. She's gone. Cut her cheating. That's it. No drama, no tears, just the facts. Guys at work nodded, slapped my shoulder, said I dodged a bullet. Maybe they were right. Last I heard, she was still at her parents', no sign of Mark sticking around. He wasn't the night she'd hoped for. Just ran into her once, said she looked rough, tired, quiet, like the fire had burned out. I didn't ask for details. Didn't need to. She'd made her bed, and I wasn't losing sleep over it. Me? I'm still here, still standing and stronger for it. Took a storm to see what I'm made of. But I'm not breaking. Not for her. Not for anyone.